David, we'll spend all day talking about hypotheticals, but let's see what the minister has said. The fall is the fall.
Sure.
So, this is a government who waited until the last possible day to table the public accounts.
CBC gets schooled over and over again while trying to defend the Carney Liberals. And speaking of the news, CTV also said something that conservatives have been saying for a very long time. My goodness. I wonder why they waited until after the election to do this. I'm Jasmine Lane. This is Over Opinionated. Subscribe, follow, like, share, comment your thoughts down below. Another riding flip to Liberals, inching them that much closer to a majority government. I also have some pretty shocking details about that to come out for you. All that and more coming up today on Over Opinionated. But I first wanted to show you this post from Mario Nawfal. I think that's how you pronounce that. And it's not necessarily relevant to today's episode, but just something really important to keep in the back of your mind, especially as the Carney Liberals are making more announcements in the years to come. So it says, bureaucracy isn't just slow, it's designed to dodge blame. 10 committees don't solve problems. They spread the risk so no one gets fired when things go wrong. That's not governance, that's cowardice with a title. You can't innovate if no one's allowed to be wrong. Progress means risk. Bureaucracy means don't touch anything until legal says it's safe. The answer isn't better forms, it's real accountability. One name, one job, one person who owns it and runs. Speed beats consensus. Accountability beats caution every single time.
What do you make of this dynamic that is playing out there? Because when I heard Scott Moe today, it seems like he's kind of pushing the Guilbeault comments to the side and putting more faith on the Prime Minister and Tim Hodgson.
Yeah, I think Mark Carney would like to push aside Stephen Guilbeault's comments about pipelines yesterday as well. Just supremely unhelpful. For that to be within the first 24 hours of naming the cabinet. One of the headlines that drove yesterday was a retread of, kind of failed policy and ideology from the previous government when Prime Minister Carney has been deliberately trying to carve a different path. So, I think the Premier is quite right. The Minister of Canadian Identity and Culture is not just a minister for Quebec culture and identity. And to come out so forcefully and say, no new pipelines, he took the most ambitious statistic possible in terms of reliance on bitumen to say, we're not even really going to need oil and gas in not that long period of time. It is the opposite, I think, of what the government wants to signal in these early days about getting energy resources moving and showing a demarcation from the previous administration.
And if that was some kind of a one-off, that's referring to Stephen Guilbeault saying that it's not just pipelines, we could expand and become an energy and economic superpower in other ways. Yeah, we should just really invest in our existing resources and infrastructure that isn't doing enough for us yet, but we should just, we should do more. And he also shared there that, the TMX is using 40% of its capacity, which is blatantly false. We did an episode about that 2 days ago. And so it would be fine if that was a one-off. Unfortunately, though, it was not. So Dominic LeBlanc, again, told a very different story to Quebec than what the Liberals campaigned on throughout the rest of the country. And he essentially, reiterated the same thing that Guilbeault did, saying that Canada it can be an energy and economic superpower. And, we always just deduce energy corridors to oil pipelines, but it's not just oil pipelines. There's so many other things that we can do. The obvious question there is, great, if that's true, why haven't we been doing them? And the second obvious answer there is, oh yeah, because that's actually super misleading. And to be skeptical of what they're saying is far from insanity, because let's just factually and strategically break all of this down. In fact, his framing of this raises some pretty major concerns, especially given Canada's current economic position. And, what he is saying, what Guilbeault is saying, is that they are avoiding pipeline expansion without actually saying it. That gives them an excuse. Oh, well, we're not going to approve that. We're not going to do that because ideologically we don't want to. And it's just because we're going to invest in the infrastructure. We're going to increase capacity of our existing infrastructure, even though we have production caps on that infrastructure that we don't plan on removing. Alrighty then. And he's also insinuating that non-oil-based solutions, so things like hydrogen, things like electricity transmission, honestly, even like data infrastructure could fall into that category, are all things that can replace pipelines and make Canada rich. And this is very manipulating to the public because you repeat this enough. The mainstream media repeats this enough, and people then get this idea in their head that why is everybody so obsessed with oil? Man, those are just some crazy rig pigs. You know, everybody is so obsessed with it when, they're totally missing the whole picture that we can actually be doing all of these other things. None of those people would then be able to tell you what those other things are because they simply do not exist. A prime example of the liberal brain rot would be Jan Arden.
Hey, Alberta. Hey, you bunch of separatist wackos. How you doing? Feeling good about yourselves? You're an embarrassment to this country. Everything you have, everything that you have enjoyed, cherished, and benefited from comes from being part of one of the greatest countries on the planet. You guys have your heads so far up your asses that you obviously can't see what pricks you are. The way you are treating Indigenous people, the way you are treating your fellow citizens, your fellow Canadians, you guys are a bunch of creepy little pricks. Alberta will never separate from Canada. It's never going to happen because people like me are going to stand up, throw their shoulders back, and keep yelling and keep standing up for what I know is right. And what you guys are doing is...
Wow, do I ever have a lot of opinions on that meltdown. Number one, if she was going to keep standing up for what is right, where has she been this whole time? Because, excuse me, girl, there's been a lot of things that have been really wrong that have happened, a lot of things that have been absolutely deplorable. And rather than speak to those, you speak on this matter. And of course, you bring in Indigenous peoples because that's what the left always does. And clearly, none of them listen to Premier Danielle Smith or anything at all, when the fact of the matter is that this is democracy. This is democratic, what is happening. You don't have to like it. I don't want Alberta to separate at all. I love Alberta. Having said that, in a democratic place, yeah, if that's your right and there's laws there for it, Canada has made those laws available for decades. And if that's the way that it works and you want to act on it, that is your democratic right. And it's so weird to me to always hear people on the left get so angry, so insulting. How many insults did she throw out there against a bunch of people that there's nothing wrong with them, by the way. They're just tired of being used and abused. That's what the situation actually is. They're not crazy wackos. They're not a fringe minority. They're people who see the whole picture, which Jan Arden clearly does not, and they're speaking on it in a democratic way, in a very respectful way. I would also add from much of what I've seen. Of course, there's wild people who are very radical and extreme in the way that they speak on social media across the board. But for the most part, everything I've seen regarding Alberta separation, which isn't actually on the table right now, by the way, has been fine. It's been fine conversation that I actually think has made a lot of people feel heard for the first time in a really long time.
That's what we're up against. You can go anywhere in the world, get a permit in 24 months, a year. Up in Ontario, 15 years. And that's that excuse the pun, but there's a gold mine. You know, Alberta's oil is equal to our critical minerals that the whole world wants. That's where we can pay for more health care, pay for education, infrastructure, reduce taxes, put money back into people's pockets, attract businesses here. But we have to get shovels in the ground and cut through this red tape, or we'll have zero investment. We need to get it done. We need to do it properly.
And to Jan Arden and everybody else just like her, of which there are quite a few in this country, I can guarantee you know a couple. Just because you are offended does not mean that you are right. And if she was so offended about standing up for what's right, perhaps she could have used her voice this entire time. You know, Canada could be the fourth largest oil producer in the world. We could have an economy as big as many of those in the UAE. We could be sixth in natural gas, and we do have massive reserves, stable rule of law, for the most part, And we're also in close proximity to the US and allies. And it is actually devastating when you think about how many of our neighbors are suffering because of politics. That's it. I remember Pierre Poilievre said that once, probably about a year or two ago now, where he really highlighted that the only reason why Canada is in the position that it is, the only reason why we're second last in the G7 is because of politics. That's actually it. It's ideologues that are in politics. It's activists that are in politics. And we just voted in a new government of that. So that's awesome. Now, there will be people who will say, oh, well, Jasmine, didn't you just listen to Dominic LeBlanc? Remember what Stephen Guilbeault said? You silly girl. You should just be, focusing on other things. Why are you so obsessed with oil? Let's go through the facts of that. First and foremost, are there actually other ways to become an energy and economic superpower that involves pipelines? No, actually, there aren't. Now, could this be something that is highly profitable in, 10, 20, 50 years? Maybe, but it's a theory. It's an idea. Nothing actual that's factual. I mean, just as an example, let's say that as Guilbeault and LeBlanc said there, hydrogen, renewables, we could really start bumping up those projects. Well, unfortunately, they're very costly. They're also very immature, and they're very unprofitable for now. So you can't even remotely match the scale and money and global demand for any of those things as we can with oil and natural gas exports. And there's all these different moves. Oh, we're going to start doing solar. I was just in Nova Scotia a couple weeks back on the Elevate podcast, and I was with one of my girlfriends, my gal pal. I don't like saying girlfriends, whatever. She lives in New Brunswick now. She's originally from Winnipeg. And while we were driving around, I noticed that there were solar panels everywhere. And I asked her, I was like, why is there so many freaking solar panels here? And she said, oh yeah, they're really big on solar panels, like on this part of the country. And I responded with, but it's cloudy here, like a lot, and it rains a lot. And she was like, yeah, that's true, isn't it? I've never even thought about that. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense, does it? And also, Mark Carney has talked an awful lot about carbon capture. I need to do a deep dive into that because my brother is actually very well versed in that technology and the infrastructure involved in that, the projects that have happened in Canada around that. And yes, carbon capture is freaking amazing. And Alberta's been doing a lot of stuff with that too. But here's the thing. There is no market for carbon capture, and it's very expensive, billions of dollars to invest in creating it. And the only thing it does is lower your own emissions. It's not something that other countries are out buying en masse right now. It's incredible technology. It's so cool, but there's no money there. So what is the point of that? I hear Mark Carney say it all the time, and I'm like, man, you are literally just banking on the fact that nobody has actually looked into this. Saskatchewan, as an example, had some really cool stuff happening with carbon capture a number of years ago. And there was people from like Japan and all over the world flying in to come learn about it and see it. It was so cool. It's nothing, though. It's absolutely nothing. It's a total bust. That has been the end result. And the reason why Mark Carney keeps saying that and why I'm so scared and skeptical of him and this, we're transforming the economy in Canada. Whoa, we're going to be an economic superpower without pipelines, is because it's Mark Carney doing what Mark Carney does. That has literally been Mark Carney's entire career, allegedly, that he does that. He pressures governments to invest in the things that he is invested in so that he makes a lot of money. That is the climate grift through and through. And so what is the actual cost to rejecting pipelines for all of these other non-existent ways that we can streamline and enhance our economy? Well, the U.S. is officially exporting record levels of LNG to Europe and Asia. You know how Mark Carney says we have to have a carbon tax in order to export to them. No, we don't, because the U.S. doesn't have one, probably never will have one, and they are beating us there by a long shot. How do you think that's going to go in terms of competition? Canada is losing billions of dollars in potential revenue and burning all sorts of bridges in terms of investment due to serious infrastructure delays due to bureaucracy. And guess what? Investors are leaving the oil patch. Investors are leaving every patch due to the instability politically, predominantly due to the high cost of living, the high taxes that keep changing all the time. And to prove to you how ideologically taken over our government is, Canada's priorities are, there's this. While our government is sitting there, oh, we're fighting for the auto sector, the EVs in Ontario, everybody's championing that, right? Oh, it's such a huge economic impact. But guess who is silent on the canola industry? I don't care if you love or hate canola. There's a lot of people that are weird about it, but at the end of the day, it is twice the size of the Canadian auto industry, $43.7 billion versus $19 billion. So where is Team Canada? Jan Arden, where are you screaming about the fact that China put on 100% tariffs that has completely just uprooted the lives of so many of our farmers, and nobody's talking about it? It's weird. I haven't heard a single person wave a flag about how harmful any tariffs are from China, but I do hear it every single day from Donald Trump.
My suspicion is that there is a budget basically ready to go. The question is, why is the Prime Minister deciding to not bring it forward now? The Prime Minister's also said that he'd like to change the accounting rules of the government. That could also be presenting a bit of a problem. But I think the Prime Minister is not getting off to a good start. He's setting himself up for a bit of a run-in, I think, with the rating agencies, perhaps with the Auditor General, and even in the Parliamentary Budget Officer, with respect to not showing just reasonable transparency in terms of the fiscal projections of the government. We're asking parliamentarians to vote on a tax cut that may cost the government upwards of $5 or $6 billion. But we don't know how we're going to pay for it.
After a lot of controversy, CBC has decided to do something big. They've agreed to stop paying independent bonuses. Don't worry, though, your taxpayer dollars are still funding them as they rake in over $1.2 billion a year in taxpayer funding. And it really does just signal the disconnect that it took so much scrutiny and complaining for them to even admit that this was wrong. And unfortunately, depending on where you get your news from, this story's coverage is very different. Some headlines are saying CBC to stop paying individual bonuses after controversy, while others are trying to describe it as though this is some kind of a routine policy change, which it's not. That's why I use Ground News. Ground News shows you how all stories are covered across the political spectrum, left, center, and right, with a visual breakdown of the bias distribution, factuality, and also the publication ownership of each reporting source. So you can actually see the full picture and all of the differences based on how it's being reported. With their bias checker, I checked this story and found that while right-leaning sources were hammering the CBC's wasteful spending, left-leaning sources were barely even touching the controversy and also just making it sound like it's no big deal. And that is where Ground's blind spot feature comes in. So whether you're on the left or right, we all have a bias. We are human beings after all. This feature helps you catch what is slipping through the cracks so that you're not just stuck in some one-sided narrative. If you're sick and tired of being stuck in a media bubble, go to ground.news/Jasmine, or you can also scan the QR code on screen to get 40% off their Vantage plan for a limited time. Remember to use my link, ground.news/Jasmine, in the description box, or you can also scan the QR code on screen to get unlimited access to worldwide news from every angle. We'll get back to David Cochrane from CBC desperately trying to defend his supreme leader, Kim Carney. But first and foremost, I have to show you this from Vashi Capello's, and it has been so disappointing how frequently there are people saying very important things that, gosh, would that ever have been helpful if they had talked about this stuff during the election? And this is certainly one of them when it comes to budgets and spending and opposition parties saying we don't support that.
Mention if it is what your government says it is, like if it is the tax cut and not a whole bunch of other stuff designed to wedge them, then yes, in principle they would, but they're waiting to see if that's the case. Will that be the case? Is this going to be a straight up and down tax cut, or are you going to include other stuff in there?
Well, I'm reluctant to go into any kind of specifics, but suffice to say we've agreed to a date to talk to the other House leaders. We will obviously keep dialoguing with other parties with respect to our plans and what we hope to accomplish in this. We'll be very transparent about what we hope to accomplish in this spring sitting. The tax cut is certainly prominent among them. In principle, can I ask you though, look, you were in the last parliament. There were on multiple occasions, legislation that was introduced or was separated from other things that was designed to be able to say, hey, this party doesn't want you to have a tax cut. And the Conservatives played their own games too. I'm not trying to take away from that.
I think the message that Canadians sent during this campaign was like, not now. Let's actually do the things that both parties are saying that they want to do to help Canadians' lives and improve their lives. Is that a message your party has taken to heart? And in principle, will that be reflected in what comes through the House? I
think that's a very valid insight, Vashi, with respect to what Canadians are telling us. They're telling us they want results out of this Parliament. They don't want games. In principle, your question was in principle. In principle, we absolutely want to move forward.
The fact that Liberals oftentimes smear Conservatives as being, oh, you're anti-rights, you're anti-helping people, you just want grandma to suffer with that toothache she has. No, that's not true at all. The Liberal government has a very bad history of presenting bills, presenting things that have like a couple key points in them, and then when they get rejected because of all of the other insane points in them, they turn it around and spin the entire public against whatever party it is that rejected them, usually the Conservatives because they're fiscally smart, and then they use that as a smear tactic. We saw that in this election en masse, and they're able to do that because they have the support of the CBC, who also just got a massive over $100 million payment, just shy of $200 million payment, by the way, without a vote, without transparency. In fact, according to this from the Financial Post, since the April election, Mark Carney has completely ignored Parliament by changing the tax rates and issuing billions in new spending, all through order in council, instead of putting these issues to a vote. Now, he says he's not even going to present Parliament with a budget. Sounds a lot like this isn't democracy. Sounds kind of scary to me, but organizations like the CBC will continue to cheer them on, will continue to not focus on details like that, and will lie by omission, which is almost worse than just outright lying, honestly.
You worked for Jim Flaherty, I think, when he was finance minister. Am I remembering that correctly? Before you were elected yourself. I mean, the election was April 28th. They're still counting and recounting and litigating some of the ridings. I mean, do you credit, like, if you had won government last month, I mean, do you credibly think you could have a budget ready to go by the early weeks of June?
Well, David, I would make two quick points. Yes, I did work for Finance Minister Jim Flaherty, who was a great mentor to me, and I think one of the greatest finance ministers of my generation or our lifetime, frankly. But let's go back to look at what happened there. Federal election, government changeover in 2006, throne speech and a budget very shortly after the election. Election in 2008, throne speech, budget very shortly after the election. And by the way, 2008, during economic kind of upheaval, by the way, Mr. Carney was working in the Department of Finance at that time as well, so he's well aware of the planning that is already done by the department officials during an election. And the second point I would make is, this is a contrast that is appearing, and I'm not sure the Prime Minister is aware of the contrast that he's setting up. Pierre Poilievre said that Conservatives, if elected, and even in this current state, would be willing to work all summer to pass the necessary legislation in order to deliver the support, not just to Canadian families, but to the Canadian economy in a time of crisis. And Prime Minister Carney is getting off to not a great start by saying, look, we're going to bring Parliament back for a couple of weeks and then we're going to break for the summer. But trust us, don't worry, we'll come back with some ideas in the fall. There are a number of things that require legislation. The GST cut for new homes, as an example, which Conservatives supported during the election. In fact, ours was beyond just first-time home buyers. That requires legislation. The personal income tax reduction requires legislation. Any changes to capital gains tax rates, which Conservatives also supported, also require legislation. If you think about some of the changes that people have talked about with respect to the Impact Assessment Act, which is the No New Pipelines bill, or other regulatory reforms, all of these things require legislation. It just is a bit bewildering why we might not be wanting to debate and table those amendments, very necessary amendments to get our economy moving right now. I mean, time is of the essence. People are making investment decisions. I just think it's not a good look for the country or inspire confidence amongst investors, rating agencies, or just everyday Canadians.
Well, in 2006, if my memory, if this Stephen Harper was sworn in as Prime Minister February 6th, the budget was May 2nd. So if we do get a large-scale financial document from the Carney government in, say, October, I mean, it's not that different than those timelines, right? Doesn't it? You know, if you're going to get some stuff in June, and then, you know, September when Parliament comes back. I mean, who knows when the fall economic statement will come? And they're pushing into December under the last Prime Minister. But early in the fall, would that satisfy, do you think, if we get something like that, and, you know, certainly before Halloween?
David, you know, we'll spend all day talking about hypotheticals, but let's see what the minister has said. The fall is the fall.
Sure.
So, you know, this is a government who waited until the last possible day to table the public accounts. The previous government ended their parliamentary, you know, reign, not abiding by House orders to produce documents, waiting until the final days to table public accounts, asking parliamentarians to vote on spending measures before even being given the closing of the books from the previous years. I think if Mr. Carney, or Prime Minister Carney, is trying to demonstrate a change from Prime Minister Trudeau's government, this is not the way that I would have recommended he start.
But hey, what on earth does Prime Minister Carney have to worry about when he is so much closer to achieving a majority win? Now, that one in Terrebonne that we talked about yesterday, an additional 5 more votes were handed in. Realistically, they will end up having a by-election. This one, though, in Milton East, Halton Hills South, the vote percentage difference was a winning vote of 48.26 to 48.21 by the Conservative leader. And while there's nothing weird about judicial recounts, they happen in every election, what is weird about it is the amount of flips. As an example, in 2011, as far as I was able to find, there was 1 flip from Conservative to NDP, 2015, 0 flips, 2021, 1 flip from Bloc to Liberal, 2025, we've had a number flipped to Liberal. So that is incredibly odd that there are so many flips. And while there are some people out there who will say to you, you must be paid by Russia if that's what you're insinuating, that's ridiculous. No, we are human beings noticing a trend, noticing a flaw. And if there is no malicious intent, we're at the very least calling on Elections Canada to do a better job of educating people, or to do a better job in general of, I don't know, having the correct postal code on their mail-in ballots. Yeah, Russia didn't tell me to say that, my brain did. So if you're feeling kind of weird about that, I'm right here with you. We will see how the rest of this unfolds. I'm Jasmine Lane. This is Over Opinionated. I really enjoyed today's episode. I know I talked a lot, so hopefully that didn't tune you out, but I did enjoy rambling a little bit here today. I will talk to you tomorrow. Be sure to subscribe, follow, comment, like, share. All of that stuff helps an awful lot.